The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched my life's work being stolen for the second time. From the marble-floored boardroom doorway, I had a perfect view of my former best friend, Sophia Chen, commanding the attention of 12 investors, her red lips moving with practiced confidence as she presented my AI breakthrough as her own genius. The neural network architecture took me 18 months to perfect, she lied smoothly, clicking to the next slide. My slide, with my code, displaying my innovation that could revolutionize predictive healthcare analytics. The morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows caught the diamond bracelet on her wrist, the same bracelet I'd helped her pick out for her birthday 3 months ago when I still believed we were partners. My manicured nails dug into my palm as the memories of my previous life crashed over me like ice water. The same boardroom, the same presentation, the same devastating betrayal that had led to my company's collapse, my father's heart attack from the stress, and ultimately my own death in a car accident while fleeing the courthouse after losing everything. But this time, I was prepared. Sophia has demonstrated exceptional vision, declared Harrison Wright, the lead investor whose signature could make or break tech startups in Silicon Valley. His silver pen moved across the term sheet as he spoke. We're prepared to offer $12 million for 40% equity. The applause that followed felt like knives in my chest. I stepped further into the shadows of the doorway, my Louboutin heels clicking softly against the Italian marble. That's when I saw him. David Chen, Sophia's older brother and my ex-fiancé, leaning against the back wall with his arms crossed, that familiar smirk playing on his lips. The same man who had left me at the altar 6 months ago in my previous life, claiming he needed time to think before I discovered him in Sophia's bed the next week. His dark eyes met mine across the room, and he had the audacity to wink. My stomach lurched as I remembered how he'd whispered sweet lies about our future while systematically helping his sister steal my research. In my first life, I'd been too heartbroken to see the calculation behind his romantic gestures, too trusting to notice how he'd steered our pillow talk toward my latest innovations. The market potential is extraordinary, came a familiar voice from the front row, and my blood turned to ice. My own mother, Linda Martinez, sat with perfect posture in her Chanel suit, nodding enthusiastically at Sophia. I've watched this brilliant young woman develop these concepts from scratch. She's like the daughter I always dreamed of having. The words hit like a physical blow. In my previous life, those same words had destroyed me more than the financial ruin. My mother had stood by Sophia through the patent disputes, the court battles, the media coverage that painted me as a jealous, delusional former employee. She'd chosen my best friend over her own daughter, claiming Sophia had more ambition and business sense. "Thank you, Mrs. Martinez," Sophia replied, her voice dripping with false humility. "Your guidance has been invaluable. I couldn't have achieved this breakthrough without your support." Dr. Chen, no relation to Sophia and David, just an unfortunate coincidence that had confused many, stepped forward from his position near the projector. My former computer science professor at Stanford, the man who'd mentored me through my PhD, who'd helped me refine the theoretical framework that made my AI possible. His weathered hands adjusted his glasses as he addressed the room. "I've been nurturing Miss Chen's talents for years," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of academic authority. "She represents the future of artificial intelligence research. Her innovative approach to neural networks is unprecedented in someone so young." My throat closed as I watched him bask in reflected glory, knowing full well that every line of code, every algorithmic breakthrough, every sleepless night of debugging had been mine. In my previous life, he'd published papers using my research, crediting himself as primary author and relegating me to a footnote. Now he was doing it again, erasing my contributions entirely. The betrayal felt fresh despite my foreknowledge. 4 people who'd claimed to love me, support me, believe in me, all conspiring to steal not just my work, but my very identity as an innovator. The pattern was so perfectly orchestrated that I almost admired its cruel efficiency. Sophia clicked to the final slide, which displayed revenue projections that made the investors lean forward with interest. "With proper funding, we anticipate capturing 15% of the healthcare AI market within 3 years. Conservative estimates put that at over $200 million in annual revenue." my revenue projections, my market analysis, my business plan, stolen from the encrypted folder on my personal laptop that David had access to during our relationship. Every detail I'd shared in confidence, every late night strategy session where I'd foolishly trusted the man I thought I'd marry. Harrison Wright stood, extending his hand to Sophia. We have a deal, Miss Chen. Welcome to the Wright Ventures portfolio. The handshake seemed to happen in slow motion. Sophia's perfectly manicured fingers, painted in the same coral shade I'd recommended, grasped the hand that would make her a multimillionaire using my life's work. The satisfied smile on her face was identical to the one I remembered from my previous life when she'd stood in this same spot, sealing this same deal, destroying my future with the same calculated precision. But this time was different. This time, I was ready. My phone was already in my hand, the recording app activated before I'd even entered the building. The conversation had been crystal clear from my position in the doorway, every incriminating word captured in perfect digital quality. But more importantly, I'd spent the last 6 months since my mysterious rebirth preparing for this exact moment. The patents I'd filed under shell companies, the evidence I'd gathered of the systematic theft, the allies I'd cultivated in secret, the financial resources Sophia didn't know I possessed. In my previous life, I'd been naive, trusting, unprepared for the depth of their betrayal. This time, I was armed with both foreknowledge and careful planning. Sophia finally noticed me standing in the doorway, her triumphant smile faltering for just a moment. She whispered something to David, who turned to look at me with undisguised contempt. Maya, Sophia called out, her voice carrying false warmth. There you are. I was just telling everyone how your administrative support has been so helpful with the presentation setup. Administrative support, the woman who'd created every line of code they were celebrating, reduced to setup assistance. Several investors glanced in my direction with mild curiosity before dismissing me entirely. Just another tech worker bee in their world of queens and kings. David approached me as the meeting began to disperse. His cologne, the same Tom Ford fragrance I'd bought him for his birthday, filling the space between us. Maya? He said quietly, his voice carrying that familiar tone of condescending concern. I hope you understand this is just business. Sophia's worked incredibly hard for this opportunity. Has she? I replied, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. His eyes narrowed slightly, perhaps sensing something different in my demeanor. In my previous life, I would have been crying by now, begging him to explain, desperately trying to understand how the people I loved most could betray me so completely. You should be proud, he continued, testing the waters. Your contributions to the team haven't gone unnoticed. I'm sure Sophia will find a place for you in the new organizational structure. A place for me, in the company built on my stolen work. The audacity was breathtaking. Dr. Chen joined our small group, his expression paternally disappointed. Maya, I hope you'll take this as a learning opportunity. Innovation requires not just technical skill, but vision and leadership. Perhaps it's time to consider whether research is truly your calling. My finger hovered over the stop button on my recording app as I looked at the three of them, my former best friend, my ex-fiancé, and my former mentor, standing there like judges at my execution. In my previous life, this moment had broken me. Their casual dismissal of my worth, their rewriting of history, their absolute certainty that they could erase me from my own story. But now I smiled, a genuine expression of satisfaction that seemed to unnerve them all. You're absolutely right, Dr. Chen, I said softly. Innovation does require vision and leadership. Thank you for the reminder. I slipped my phone into my Hermes bag, a purchase I'd made with money from investments that my rebirth knowledge had made incredibly profitable, and walked toward the elevator. My mother called my name, but I didn't turn around. There would be time for that conversation later. As the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished steel. Gone was the broken, naive woman who died in a car crash 6 months ago. In her place stood someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. The war was about to begin, and this time I knew exactly how to win. The notification pinged on my phone at exactly 9:47 a.m., 3 days after the board meeting that had changed everything. I was sitting in what used to be my corner office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Francisco Bay, the one I'd specifically requested when we'd signed the lease 2 years ago. Now it belonged to Sophia, complete with my custom-designed standing desk and the succulent garden I'd carefully cultivated on the windowsill. "Congratulations on your promotion, Maya," the company-wide email read, sent from Sophia's new CEO account. "We're excited to announce that Maya Martinez will be transitioning to our research and development specialist role, where her attention to detail will be invaluable in our new downtown facility." Downtown facility. I almost laughed at the euphemism. The facility was a converted warehouse in Soma with no windows, flickering fluorescent lights, and the persistent smell of the fish market next door. It was where companies sent employees they wanted to quit voluntarily, saving themselves the paperwork of wrongful termination lawsuits. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, our shared assistant, or rather, Sophia's assistant now. "So sorry about the office change. Sophia said it's temporary while they renovate upstairs. Your new keycard is at reception." Jennifer Park, 24 years old, fresh out of UC Berkeley with her marketing degree, eager to please and apparently unaware that she'd been participating in corporate espionage for months. In my previous life, I'd dismissed her involvement as naive compliance. This time, I'd been watching more carefully. The basement office was exactly as depressing as I remembered. Concrete walls painted an institutional beige, a metal desk that looked like it belonged in a 1980s government building, and a single window that offered a view of the dumpster behind the neighboring Thai restaurant. The fluorescent light above my desk flickered intermittently, casting everything in an unflattering, sickly glow. I set down my cardboard box of personal items, carefully curated to look defeated while concealing my real work, and immediately got to business. The first discovery came within an hour of logging into my newly restricted computer system. The client database access logs told a story that made my blood boil with familiar rage. For the past 6 months, someone had been systematically downloading our most sensitive client files, contract terms, proprietary project details, competitive pricing strategies. The timestamp patterns were clear. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m., when the office was officially empty but keycard access showed Jennifer Park was still in the building. But the real revelation came when I cross-referenced those dates with my personal calendar. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months, I'd been at dinner with Sophia, or drinks with David, or family dinners with my mother. Perfect alibis, carefully orchestrated to ensure I was nowhere near the office when my life's work was being stolen piece by piece. I pulled up the sales records next, my hands trembling with controlled fury as the pattern became clear. Phoenix Pharmaceuticals, our biggest account worth $4.2 million annually, had received a competing proposal for identical services at 30% lower pricing. The proposal had been submitted by Innovate Tech Solutions, a company that hadn't existed 6 months ago, but was now undercutting our every bid with supernatural accuracy. A quick LinkedIn search revealed Innovate Tech's executive team, and my heart sank into my stomach. David Chen, listed as Chief Legal Officer. Dr. Robert Chen, no relation, listed as Chief Technology Officer. And Jennifer Park, listed as Director of Business Development, smiling professionally in a headshot that had been taken in our own conference room. They hadn't just stolen my research, they'd stolen my clients, my pricing strategies, my entire business model. While I'd been mourning the betrayal of my presentation theft, they'd been systematically dismantling everything I'd built, client by client, contract by contract. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking in its audacity and precision. I reached for my phone, hands steadier now that the shock was giving way to cold calculation. Marcus Rivera, Phoenix Pharmaceuticals' Chief Technology Officer, answered on the second ring. "Maya, I was hoping you'd call. We need to talk about the renewal terms your team proposed. Frankly, I'm concerned about some inconsistencies we've noticed." "What kind of inconsistencies, Marcus?" "Well, The technical specifications in your latest proposal don't match the quality of work we've seen from you personally. And when I called to discuss modifications, I was told you were no longer the primary contact for our account. That's unusual, given your track record with us. My pulse quickened. Marcus had worked with me directly for 18 months, had seen my code, understood my approach to problem solving. He knew the difference between my work and someone else's imitation. I'd love to discuss that with you in person, I said carefully. Are you free for lunch today? Somewhere private where we can talk openly? 2 hours later, we sat in a quiet corner booth at Waterfront Restaurant, the lunch crowd providing perfect cover for our conversation. Marcus spread the competing proposals across the table between us, his weathered face creased with confusion and frustration. Look, Maya, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know quality work when I see it. These innovate tech proposals, they're using your algorithms, your methodologies, even your formatting style. But the implementation details are sloppy, like someone copied your homework without understanding the underlying concepts. I studied the documents, recognizing my own code snippets embedded in inferior frameworks. It was like watching someone wear my clothes on a body that didn't fit properly. Recognizable but fundamentally wrong. There's something else, Marcus continued, lowering his voice. Innovate Tech's Jennifer Park called me directly yesterday. She implied that you were having performance issues and that Phoenix might want to consider switching providers before our renewal deadline. She seemed to know very specific details about our contract terms, details that aren't public information. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Jennifer, with her bright smile and eager-to-please attitude, had been playing a longer game than I'd realized. She hadn't just stolen files. She'd been actively sabotaging my professional relationships, poisoning clients against me while positioning herself as their savior. Marcus, I said quietly, how would you feel about seeing some documentation that might explain these inconsistencies? I slid a tablet across the table, displaying the access logs I discovered, the timeline of file downloads, and the correlation between Jennifer's after-hours activities and the subsequent competitive bids. Marcus's expression darkened as he scrolled through the evidence. This is corporate espionage, he said flatly. Maya, if this is accurate, Innovate Tech has been stealing proprietary information to undercut your bids. Information they could only have gotten from someone with internal access to your systems. That's my assessment as well. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents with the careful attention of someone who'd survived 2 decades in the cutthroat world of pharmaceutical technology. Finally, he looked up at me with something like admiration in his eyes. You know, Maya, in my experience, the best revenge in business isn't emotional, it's professional. You destroy someone by being better than them, not by stooping to their level. What did you have in mind? He smiled, and I saw the sharp intelligence that had made him successful in an industry where fortunes rose and fell on technological advantages. Our renewal contract with your company comes up for board approval next Thursday. Public meeting, open to shareholders and press. I think it might be interesting to discuss our concerns about information security and competitive integrity as part of our decision-making process. My heart raced as I understood his implication. A public rejection of our company's proposal, with specific citations of security concerns and competitive misconduct, would be devastating to Sophia's new reputation. More importantly, it would raise questions about how our competitors had gained access to proprietary information. That's a very thorough approach to due diligence, I agreed carefully. I pride myself on thoroughness, especially when it comes to protecting Phoenix's interests and maintaining ethical business relationships. We shook hands across the table, and I felt the first piece of my revenge strategy click into place. But as I walked back to my basement office, my phone buzzed with a message that made my blood run cold. Family dinner tonight, 7 p.m., bringing Sophia. She has exciting news to share. Mom wants to celebrate our brilliant girl. Don't be late. The text was from my mother, accompanied by a photo of her and Sophia shopping together at Union Square, their faces glowing with shared excitement. Our brilliant girl. Not her daughter's achievement, but Sophia's success. The same words my mother had used in my previous life. The same dismissive affection that had slowly poisoned our relationship until I died estranged from the woman who'd raised me. But this time, I had information my mother didn't expect me to possess. This time, I was ready for the conversation that would reveal just how deep her betrayal truly ran. I typed back a simple response. Looking forward to it. I have some exciting news to share too. The pieces were moving into position and the game was accelerating faster than they could anticipate. Sophia thought she'd won by stealing my presentation and my office. Jennifer thought she'd covered her tracks by playing the innocent assistant. My mother thought she could continue choosing her surrogate daughter over her real one. They had no idea that their real enemy wasn't the broken, naive Maya they remembered from my previous life. Their real enemy was someone who knew exactly how this story ended and was rewriting it with ruthless precision. The war had begun, and I was finally ready to fight it properly. The key turned too easily in the lock of my childhood bedroom door, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. It was 6:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the family dinner where my mother planned to celebrate Sophia's exciting news, and I'd come home early to change clothes and steel myself for another evening of watching my replacement receive the affection I'd always craved. But as I pushed open the door to the room where I'd spent 18 years of my life, my breath caught in my throat. The space had been transformed into a makeshift office, complete with my old desk repositioned under the window, a new ergonomic chair, and a bulletin board covered with what looked suspiciously like my proprietary research notes. Sophia looked up from my childhood desk, the one my father had built by hand when I turned 10, with barely concealed annoyance at the interruption. Her laptop was open, displaying code that I recognized as my neural network architecture. Beside it lay my old journals, the ones I'd kept throughout high school and college, filled with early concepts and algorithmic theories that had eventually become my breakthrough AI system. "Oh, Maya," she said with false brightness, quickly closing the laptop screen. "I didn't hear you come in. Your mom said I could work up here since it's so quiet. You don't mind, do you?" My mind reeled as I took in the scene. This wasn't just betrayal, it was violation on the most intimate level. My mother had given my former best friend access to my most private space, my personal sanctuary, the room where I dreamed of changing the world through technology. "What are you doing with my journals?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Oh, these old things?" Sophia gestured dismissively at the notebooks that contained years of my intellectual development. "Your mom thought they might have some interesting historical context for the research I'm doing, understanding the evolution of AI concepts over time." Historical context. As if my life's work was ancient history, as if my innovations were archaeological artifacts to be studied rather than stolen. I moved closer and saw my own handwriting scattered across her workspace, sketches of neural network architectures, notes about machine learning optimization, even personal reflections about my hopes for using AI to revolutionize healthcare. "Sophia, those are private journals. They were never meant to be—" "Maya, sweetheart, you're home." My mother's voice interrupted from the doorway, her tone artificially cheerful in the way that meant she was about to justify something she knew was wrong. She wore her best hostess smile and carried a tray of her famous chocolate chip cookies, the ones she only made for special occasions or when she felt guilty about something. "Mom, why is Sophia in my room with my personal notebooks?" Linda Martinez stepped fully into the room, her expression shifting to one of patient explanation, as if I were a child who needed a complex situation simplified. "Darling, Sophia needed a quiet place to work on her presentation for the investors next week. You know how important this is for her career. And these old school notebooks were just gathering dust. I thought she might find them useful for background research." "Background research on what?" "These are my personal thoughts, my private work." "Oh, Maya," my mother interrupted with a light laugh that felt like a slap. "They're just old homework assignments and teenage scribbles. You're being a bit dramatic, don't you think?" Teenage scribbles. I stared at my mother, this woman who had raised me, who had supposedly loved me, who was now casually dismissing the intellectual foundation of my entire career as worthless doodles. In my previous life, this moment had broken something fundamental inside me. The realization that my own mother saw my work as expendable while treating Sophia's theft as worthy of celebration. "Besides," Mom continued, setting the cookie tray on my old nightstand, Sophia has been so stressed about the competition in her field. I thought you'd want to help her succeed. That's what families do for each other. We support the people we love. The people we love, not me, apparently. Not her actual daughter. The woman she loved was sitting at my desk, using my childhood bedroom as her personal office while stealing the contents of my private journals. Mrs. Martinez has been incredibly generous, Sophia added, her voice dripping with false gratitude. I don't know what I would have done without her guidance. She's like the mother I never had, so understanding and supportive. The barb hit its intended target. Sophia's own mother had died when she was 12, and I'd spent countless hours comforting her through that grief, sharing my own mother's attention because I thought that's what friendship meant. Now she was using that shared history as a weapon, claiming my mother's love while erasing my existence from the equation. I think I'll head downstairs, I said quietly, unable to trust my voice with anything more substantial. Wait, my mother called, following me into the hallway. Maya, I hope you understand that this is temporary. Sophia just needs a few weeks to finish her project, and then everything will go back to normal. Normal? As if there was anything normal about giving a non-family member access to my private space while I was displaced to a basement office at work. As if normal included my mother choosing someone else's success over her own daughter's privacy and dignity. Of course, Mom, whatever Sophia needs. The dinner that followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare disguised as family celebration. We sat around the dining room table where I'd eaten thousands of meals, but tonight I felt like a stranger, observing someone else's family through a window. Sophia had changed into one of my old dresses, a navy blue sheath that I'd left in my closet and that fit her perfectly, as if she'd been trying on my clothes along with my identity. She regaled my parents with stories of her investor meetings, her voice animated with excitement as she described the breakthrough innovations she'd developed. The neural network architecture was the real challenge, she explained, cutting into the lasagna my mother had made from scratch, my favorite recipe that Mom rarely prepared anymore. It took months of trial and error to get the learning algorithms balanced correctly. My father, who had always been proud of my technical achievements, leaned forward with interest. That sounds incredibly complex, Sophia. Maya never explained the details of her work in terms I could understand, but you make it sound so clear. Oh, I've always been good at translating technical concepts for broader audiences, Sophia replied modestly. It's a skill you develop when you're truly passionate about your research. My mother nodded approvingly. That's what I've always admired about Sophia. She has the vision to see the bigger picture, not just the technical details. Maya tends to get lost in the weeds, but Sophia understands how to turn innovation into real business success. I sat in silence, methodically eating my dinner while listening to my parents praise my former best friend for stealing my life's work. Every bite of my mother's cooking tasted like ash. Every word of admiration for Sophia felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. Maya's been so supportive through this whole process, Sophia continued, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand with false affection. I couldn't have done this without her encouragement. She's always been so generous with her time and insights. Generous with my insights, that was certainly one way to describe systematic theft. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I glanced down to see a notification from Jennifer Park. Hey, saw your mom and Sophia at Nordstrom today. They were picking out outfits for some big celebration dinner. So sweet how close they are. The message included a photo that made my stomach lurch. My mother and Sophia in the department store, arms linked like mother and daughter. Sophia holding up an expensive blouse while my mother nodded approvingly. They looked happy, natural together in a way that my mother and I had never achieved. But what made my blood run cold was the timestamp on the photo, 2:47 p.m., 2 hours ago, which meant they'd gone shopping together right after Sophia had finished going through my private journals, celebrating their violation of my privacy with a bonding retail therapy session. Maya, you're being awfully quiet, my father observed. Are you feeling all right? I looked up from my phone to find 3 pairs of eyes focused on me with varying degrees of concern and calculation. My parents looked genuinely worried about my silence, while Sophia's expression held a hint of satisfaction, as if my obvious distress was confirmation of her victory. I'm fine, I said quietly. Just thinking about work, we had some interesting developments with our client contracts today. Oh? Sophia's interest sharpened noticeably. What kind of developments? I smiled, a genuine expression that seemed to unnerve her. Phoenix Pharmaceuticals is reconsidering their renewal. Apparently, they have some concerns about information security and competitive practices in our industry. They're planning to make their decision public next week. The color drained from Sophia's face, and I saw her hand tighten around her wine glass. She knew exactly what Phoenix's public rejection would mean for her newly stolen company. And, more importantly, she knew that I was somehow involved in creating that problem. Well, my mother said brightly, apparently oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, I'm sure everything will work out for the best. Successful people always find a way to overcome challenges. She was looking at Sophia when she said it, not at me. But as I excused myself from dinner early, claiming fatigue, I caught my mother following me toward the stairs. In the hallway, away from my father and Sophia, she grabbed my arm with surprising firmness. Maya, she said quietly, her voice losing its artificial warmth. I hope you're not planning to do anything that might interfere with Sophia's success. She's worked very hard for this opportunity, and it would be unfortunate if jealousy caused you to make decisions you'd regret. Jealousy. My own mother was threatening me on behalf of the woman who had stolen my life's work, warning me not to interfere with my own destruction. I'm not jealous, Mom, I replied calmly. I'm just looking forward to seeing how everything unfolds. Her grip tightened on my arm. What does that mean? It means that truth has a way of revealing itself, I said, gently removing her hand from my arm. Sometimes sooner than people expect. As I climbed the stairs to what used to be my bedroom, now Sophia's temporary office, I could hear my mother returning to the dining room, her voice bright and reassuring as she rejoined the celebration of my replacement. But I wasn't the same broken woman who had fled from this house in my previous life. This time, I had evidence. This time, I had allies. And this time, I was ready to show them exactly what happened when you tried to erase Maya Martinez from her own story. The war was escalating, and tomorrow, the real battle would begin. The call came at 6:23 a.m., just as I was finishing my morning run through Golden Gate Park. The October fog hung low over the eucalyptus trees, and my breath formed small clouds in the crisp air as I checked the caller ID. Victoria Chen, managing partner, Meridian Capital. A name that would mean nothing to Sophia or David, but everything to me. Maya, came the crisp, professional voice I'd been expecting. I trust you're ready for today's meeting? More than ready, I replied, wiping sweat from my forehead as I approached my Tesla, purchased 6 months ago with profits from cryptocurrency investments that my Rebirth knowledge had made incredibly lucrative. Did you get the additional documentation I sent? Every piece. And Maya, what we've uncovered goes deeper than corporate theft. Your Dr. Chen has been running this operation for years, and his academic fraud extends far beyond your research. Victoria Chen. No relation to Sophia, David, or Dr. Robert Chen, despite the shared surname that had initially confused several business reporters. She was the daughter Dr. Chen claimed didn't exist, the brilliant venture capitalist he disowned 15 years ago when she'd threatened to expose his pattern of stealing graduate student research for his own publications. In my previous life, I'd never known about Victoria. Dr. Chen had buried that family connection so deeply that even his closest colleagues believed he was an only child. But death had given me access to information that life had hidden. And my first priority after Rebirth had been tracking down Dr. Chen's estranged daughter who'd built a career on destroying academic fraudsters. How long have you been investigating him? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Since 2018, when one of his former PhD students committed suicide after he stole her dissertation research. I've been building a case ever since, waiting for the right moment to destroy him completely. The right moment had arrived 6 months ago when I'd contacted Victoria with an offer she couldn't refuse. Complete access to Dr. Chen's current operation in exchange for her expertise in corporate warfare. What I hadn't told her was how I'd known about her existence or why I'd been so certain about the pattern of theft she'd been investigating. Meet me at the Fairmont in an hour, Victoria continued. Presidential suite. We have visitors who are very interested in your evidence. I ended the call and drove home to shower and change, my mind racing through the final preparations I'd made over the past 6 months. The shell company purchases, the strategic patent filings, the carefully cultivated relationships with key investors and regulatory officials. Most importantly, the documentation I'd gathered that would prove my ownership of every innovation Sophia was claiming as her own. The elevator to the presidential suite at the Fairmont San Francisco moved smoothly upward, carrying me toward a meeting that would reshape everything. Through the glass walls, I could see the city sprawling below, the same view that had inspired me as a child to dream of changing the world through technology. Victoria answered the door herself, her silver hair pulled back in a severe chignon that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and intelligent eyes. At 62, she commanded respect in Silicon Valley boardrooms where younger men twice her size had learned to fear her analytical precision. Maya, she said, embracing me briefly before stepping back to study my appearance. You look different, stronger. Death has a way of clarifying your priorities, I replied, then caught myself at her puzzled expression. I mean, career setbacks. They teach you resilience. The suite's living room was arranged like a war room, with 3 large monitors displaying corporate organizational charts, financial records, and what appeared to be academic publication timelines stretching back 20 years. 2 men in expensive suits rose from the leather sofa as I entered. Maya Martinez, Victoria announced. Meet Special Agent Harrison Wade from the FBI's White Collar Crime Division and James Liu from the SEC's Enforcement Branch. Gentlemen, this is the woman who's going to help us take down one of the most sophisticated academic and corporate fraud operations we've ever encountered. Agent Wade extended his hand, his grip firm and professional. Ms. Martinez, we understand you have evidence of systematic intellectual property theft involving multiple co-conspirators. More than evidence, I replied, settling into the chair Victoria indicated. I have a complete roadmap of their operation, including financial records, communication transcripts, and technical documentation proving original authorship of the stolen innovations. I opened my laptop and connected it to the presentation screen, displaying the first slide of a 127-page dossier I'd assembled over 6 months of careful investigation. The title read, Corporate Espionage and Academic Fraud, a Multi-Year Criminal Enterprise Led by Dr. Robert Chen. The operation began in 2018, I explained, clicking to show a timeline of thefts, when Dr. Chen established a pattern of identifying promising graduate students, gaining their trust as a mentor, then systematically stealing their research for his own publications and commercial ventures. Agent Wade leaned forward, studying the documentation with obvious interest. How many victims are we talking about? 17 that I can prove, likely more that haven't been documented. The total value of stolen intellectual property exceeds $50 million. James Liu from the SEC whistled softly. And this Sophia Chen, she's his accomplice? She's his primary operational asset, I confirmed, clicking to the next slide that showed Sophia's involvement timeline. Dr. Chen identified her as a perfect front person, intelligent enough to be credible, manipulative enough to gain victims' trust, and desperate enough for success to participate in systematic fraud. Victoria moved to stand beside the screen, her voice cold with professional satisfaction. Maya has documented not just the current theft of her AI research, but a pattern of behavior that includes securities fraud, wire fraud, and a criminal conspiracy. Dr. Chen has been using his academic position to identify innovations with commercial potential, then deploying Sophia to infiltrate the inventors' personal lives and steal their work. The personal infiltration is key to their success, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of describing my own victimization. Sophia doesn't just steal research, she destroys the victim's support network. She befriends family members, romantic partners, and professional colleagues, turning them against the original inventor while positioning herself as the true genius. Agent Wade studied photos of Sophia with my mother, with David, with Jennifer Park. How long was she cultivating these relationships? 18 months, I replied. She's been systematically undermining my credibility while gathering intelligence about my work, my personal life, and my business operations. And the financial component? James Liu asked. I clicked to a series of bank records that had taken months to obtain through private investigators and financial forensics experts. Innovate Tech Solutions, the competing company that's been undercutting my client contracts, is funded through a series of shell companies ultimately controlled by Dr. Chen. The operation is sophisticated enough to avoid obvious detection, but sloppy enough to leave a paper trail for investigators who know what to look for. Victoria smiled grimly. Which brings us to the beautiful irony of this case. Dr. Chen taught Maya about forensic analysis of corporate fraud during her graduate studies. He literally trained her to uncover exactly the kind of operation he was running. The revelation hit Agent Wade with obvious appreciation for the poetic justice. So she's using his own methodology to expose him? Enhanced with techniques he never learned, I confirmed. I've had 6 months to refine my approach and gather evidence he never expected me to find. James Liu was studying the financial records with growing excitement. Ms. Martinez, this documentation could support criminal charges for wire fraud, conspiracy, securities violations, and money laundering. We're talking about potential prison sentences of 20 to 30 years. But, Agent Wade interjected, we need to be careful about how we proceed. If they suspect they're under investigation, they could destroy evidence or flee. What's their current operational timeline? I smiled, feeling the satisfaction of perfect timing. Sophia is presenting to a major venture capital consortium next Tuesday. She's expecting to close a $25 million funding round based on my stolen research. Dr. Chen will be there to provide academic credibility, and my former assistant, Jennifer Park, will be presenting the business development strategy. All of them in one room, publicly claiming ownership of stolen property, Victoria mused, with media present and legal documents being signed. Exactly. But there's one more element they don't know about. I clicked to my final slide, showing a corporate filing dated 6 weeks ago. I've spent the past 6 months quietly reacquiring control of my original company through a series of strategic purchases. As of last Friday, I own 51% of the voting shares in Innogen Technologies, the company Sophia thinks she's running. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Agent Wade was the first to speak. You're telling us that when Sophia presents to investors next Tuesday, she'll actually be presenting as an employee of a company you control? That's correct. And since she'll be claiming ownership of research that's legally protected under patents I filed 6 months ago, she'll be committing fraud in front of witnesses while technically being my subordinate. Victoria laughed, a sound of pure professional appreciation. Maya, that's not just evidence gathering, that's artistic. There's one more thing, I said quietly. My mother will be at that presentation. She's planning to introduce Sophia as the daughter she always wanted, not knowing that she'll be watching her surrogate daughter get arrested for federal crimes. The personal cost of this revelation would be devastating but necessary. My mother had made her choice when she gave Sophia access to my private journals and my childhood bedroom. Now she would learn the consequences of betraying her own daughter in favor of a criminal. Agent Wade closed his notebook with a snap of finality. Ms. Martinez, we'll need you to wear a wire to that presentation. Can you handle being in the same room with all of them while we document their admissions of guilt? I've been preparing for that moment since the day I died, I replied, then caught myself again. I mean, since the day they betrayed me. I'm ready. Victoria walked me to the elevator when the meeting concluded, her expression mixing professional respect with personal concern. Maya, are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we execute these arrests, there's no going back. Your relationships with these people will be destroyed forever. I thought about my mother choosing Sophia over me, about David's smirk in the boardroom, about Dr. Chen erasing my contributions while taking credit for my innovations, about Sophia sitting in my childhood bedroom, stealing not just my work, but my identity, my family, my entire life. Victoria, I said, as the elevator doors opened, they destroyed those relationships long before I decided to fight back. I'm just making the destruction official. As the elevator descended toward the lobby, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. The woman looking back at me bore a little resemblance to the naive, trusting person who had died 6 months ago. This woman had learned that sometimes the only way to stop being a victim was to become something your enemies never expected. They're superior in every way that mattered. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made San Francisco look like a postcard. I stood in my penthouse bathroom, applying makeup with steady hands while the city awakened below me. The face in the mirror belonged to someone I barely recognized, composed, calculating, ready for war. The wire taped to my ribcage was surprisingly comfortable, a tiny piece of technology that would capture every incriminating word my former friends and family were about to speak. Agent Wade had tested it twice, his voice crackling through my earpiece. Just act natural, Maya. Let them talk. Criminals always want to brag about how clever they've been. Natural. As if there was anything natural about orchestrating the destruction of people you'd once loved. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Can't wait for you to see the presentation today. It's going to be amazing. Your support means everything. I typed back, wouldn't miss it for the world. The Meridian Capitol conference room occupied the entire 42nd floor of the Trans-America Pyramid, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Bay Area. 27 investors sat around an oval table of polished mahogany, their combined net worth exceeding $12 billion. This was where Silicon Valley legends were born, where billion-dollar valuations were decided over artisanal coffee and Danish pastries. I arrived 30 minutes early, positioning myself in the observer section where I could see everything while remaining partially hidden behind the room's architectural columns. The wire recorder captured my steady breathing as I watched the players in my elaborate trap take their positions. Dr. Chen entered first, his silver hair perfectly styled, wearing the same navy suit he'd worn to destroy me in my previous life. He commanded immediate respect from the investors, several of whom rose to shake his hand and exchange pleasantries about mutual colleagues. His reputation as a visionary computer science professor preceded him into every room, opening doors that his victim's stolen work had built. Robert, called Harrison Wright, the lead investor whose signature would determine today's outcome. Looking forward to seeing what your protege has developed. The preliminary materials were extraordinary. My extraordinary materials, presented as Sophia's breakthrough innovations. Jennifer Park arrived next, wheeling in presentation equipment with practiced efficiency. She had traded her usual casual attire for a sharp black suit that made her look older, more serious, ready to play in the big leagues. As she set up the projection system, I caught her checking her phone with obvious nervousness. The device in my ear crackled with Victoria's voice. Audio is crystal clear, Maya. Remember, let them incriminate themselves fully before you reveal anything. David entered the room like he owned it, his expensive Italian suit and confident stride commanding attention from several female investors. He scanned the room with a predatory assessment, his eyes lingering on potential clients and strategic contacts. When his gaze passed over my hidden position, I felt nothing. No residual attraction, no lingering hurt. Just cold satisfaction that his arrogance was about to cost him everything. Then Sophia made her entrance, and I had to admit she was magnificent. She wore a stunning red power dress that I'd never seen before, her hair styled in elegant waves that caught the morning light streaming through the windows. She moved with absolute confidence, greeting investors by name, her smile radiant with anticipation of triumph. Behind her, wearing her best Chanel suit and beaming with maternal pride, came my mother. Ladies and gentlemen, Harrison Wright announced, please welcome Sophia Chen, whose revolutionary AI architecture is poised to transform predictive healthcare analytics. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. I watched Sophia soak in the admiration, her eyes bright with the validation she'd craved her entire career. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She had no idea that every word she was about to speak was being recorded by federal agents, that every claim of innovation was about to be proven as theft, that this moment of triumph was actually the beginning of her complete destruction. Thank you, Sophia began, her voice clear and confident. 18 months ago, I began developing what I believed could be the next generation of medical AI technology. Working closely with my mentor, Dr. Robert Chen, I've created something that will revolutionize how we predict and prevent disease. The first lie captured in perfect digital quality. She clicked to her opening slide, my slide, displaying my neural network architecture under her name. The breakthrough came when I realized that traditional machine learning approaches were fundamentally limited by their inability to process emotional and psychological factors alongside clinical data. My breakthrough, my realization, my 18 months of sleepless nights and breakthrough moments, casually claimed as her own intellectual property. Dr. Chen stepped forward to add his endorsement. I've been working with brilliant students for 30 years, and Sophia represents the pinnacle of innovative thinking. Her approach to neural network design is unprecedented, combining rigorous mathematical foundations with intuitive understanding of human psychology. The technical implementation required developing entirely new algorithms. Sophia continued, displaying slides of code that I'd written in my childhood bedroom while she was supposedly studying abroad. Each neural pathway had to be manually optimized to handle the complexity of human health data. Jennifer Park moved to the presentation screen, her laser pointer highlighting specific code segments. The business applications are extraordinary. We've already demonstrated 94% accuracy in predicting cardiac events 6 months before clinical symptoms appear. My accuracy rates, achieved through algorithms I developed during graduate school, now being presented as their collective achievement. The market potential, David interjected smoothly, exceeds $50 billion annually. We're not just talking about better healthcare. We're talking about a fundamental transformation of how medicine is practiced worldwide. I watched the investors lean forward with obvious interest, their excitement palpable as they absorbed the magnitude of what was being presented. Several were already taking notes, undoubtedly calculating potential returns on their investments. Questions? Sophia asked, her confidence absolute. The first question came from Margaret Thompson, a biotech specialist known for her thorough due diligence. The algorithmic complexity you're describing would require extensive testing and validation. How long did the development process actually take? 2 years of intensive research and development, Sophia replied without hesitation. Dr. Chen provided guidance on the theoretical framework while I handled the practical implementation and testing phases. Another lie captured with perfect clarity. And the intellectual property protections? Asked another investor. Jennifer Park answered this one. All core algorithms are protected under provisional patents filed 6 months ago. We have comprehensive documentation of the development process and can provide complete technical specifications under appropriate confidentiality agreements. My patents, filed under shell companies I controlled, now being claimed as their property. The irony was beautiful in its audacity. Dr. Chen, Harrison Wright addressed my former mentor directly, you've staked your reputation on this project. What makes you so confident in the commercial viability? Dr. Chen's response was exactly what I'd expected. In 30 years of academic research, I've never seen innovation of this caliber from someone so young. Sophia has achieved something that graduate students typically require 5 to 7 years to develop. Her insights into machine learning optimization are genuinely revolutionary. Revolutionary insights that he'd helped steal from my private journals. The presentation continued for another 40 minutes, each slide representing months of my stolen work, each claim of innovation another federal crime being committed in front of witnesses. I watched my former best friend, my ex-fiancé, my former mentor, and my own assistant systematically steal credit for every significant achievement of my career. But the most painful moment came when my mother was invited to speak. As someone who's watched Sophia develop these concepts, she began, her voice warm with genuine affection, I can tell you that her dedication has been extraordinary. She's the daughter every parent dreams of having, brilliant, hardworking, and generous with her talents. The daughter every parent dreams of having. Not me, her actual daughter, but the woman who'd stolen my life's work and my family's love with equal efficiency. Sophia has spent countless hours in our home, working late into the night, never complaining about the difficulty of her research. She's truly special. Countless hours in my childhood bedroom, stealing my private journals while my mother provided cookies and encouragement. As the formal presentation concluded and the investors began discussing terms, Victoria's voice crackled in my earpiece. Maya, we have enough evidence to convict all of them. Are you ready? I stood up from my hidden position, my movement catching the attention of several people in the room. Sophia's face went white as she realized I'd been there the entire time, listening to every word of her performance. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room, before you finalize any agreements, there's something you should know about the intellectual property you're discussing. The room fell silent. Harrison Wright looked confused. Dr. Chen appeared alarmed, and Sophia's confident smile finally cracked. I'm Maya Martinez, I announced, walking toward the presentation screen. And every algorithm, every line of code, every innovative concept you've just heard described belongs to me. I clicked my remote, and the screen changed to display my original patent filings, my development timelines, and my documentation proving original authorship of every innovation they'd claimed. The neural network architecture Ms. Chen just presented was developed in my private laboratory over 18 months. The business projections were based on my market research. The technical specifications came from my personal notebooks, which were stolen from my childhood bedroom with my mother's assistance. Gasps echoed around the room as investors realized they'd just witnessed a systematic fraud presentation. Furthermore, I continued, the company you're considering funding, Inogen Technologies, is actually under my majority control as of 6 weeks ago, which means Ms. Chen has just committed securities fraud by misrepresenting ownership of a company I legally control. The silence that followed was profound. Then, Agent Wade and his team entered through the conference room doors, their badges clearly visible. FBI, Agent Wade announced. Dr. Robert Chen, Sophia Chen, David Chen, and Jennifer Park, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy, securities fraud, and theft of intellectual property. The chaos that erupted was everything I'd hoped for and more devastating than I'd expected. Sophia screamed accusations at me while being handcuffed. David tried to flee through a side door only to be blocked by additional agents, and Dr. Chen simply stood in stunned silence as his 30-year career crumbled around him. But the most heartbreaking moment was watching my mother's face as she realized that her perfect daughter was being arrested for federal crimes, while her real daughter had orchestrated the entire operation. Maya, she whispered, her voice breaking, what have you done? I've done exactly what you taught me to do, Mom, I replied quietly. I've taken care of myself, since no one else was willing to. As the agents led my former friends away in handcuffs, the investors sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what they'd just witnessed. Harrison Wright was the first to speak. Ms. Martinez, he said carefully, I believe we need to have a very different conversation about funding opportunities. I smiled, looking out at the city where I had been reborn into a second chance at justice. Yes, I agreed, I believe we do. The penthouse elevator climbed silently toward the 52nd floor, carrying 3 FBI agents, 2 handcuffed prisoners, and a bank of news cameras toward what would become the final scene of my carefully orchestrated revenge. Through the glass walls of the elevator shaft, San Francisco spread out below us like a circuit board, all glittering connections and flowing power. Agent Wade adjusted his earpiece as we rose. Media crews are already positioned in the lobby and outside the building. This is going to be the lead story on every business network tonight. I nodded, my reflection in the polished steel doors showing a woman I barely recognized. 6 months ago, I'd been a naive inventor who trusted the wrong people. Today, I was something harder, sharper. Someone who'd learned that mercy was a luxury victims couldn't afford. The elevator chimed softly as we reached my floor. The doors opened to reveal my penthouse apartment. 1,500 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist luxury that I'd purchased with cryptocurrency profits my Rebirth knowledge had made possible. The space was deliberately designed to intimidate. Stark white furniture, abstract art that cost more than most people's annual salaries, and a view of the city that made visitors feel small and temporary. Sophia entered first, her hands cuffed behind her back, her red power dress now wrinkled and stained with tears. The confident woman who'd commanded the conference room that morning had been replaced by someone desperate and broken, her eyes darting around my apartment with obvious shock at its opulence. Maya, she began, her voice cracking. Please, you have to listen to me. This is all a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, I interrupted quietly, was my belief that you were capable of genuine friendship. Dr. Chen followed, flanked by two agents, his silver hair disheveled and his expensive suit jacket torn at the shoulder where he'd struggled during his arrest. The man who'd commanded respect in academic circles for 3 decades now looked like what he truly was, a common thief whose crimes had finally caught up with him. Behind them came David, his hands also cuffed, his Italian suit wrinkled and his face flushed with anger and disbelief. He kept staring at me as if I were a stranger, as if the woman who'd orchestrated his downfall couldn't possibly be the same person he'd left at the altar 6 months ago. "Maya," he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "You've lost your mind. When my lawyers get through with you." "Your lawyers?" I smiled, settling into the white leather chair that faced the floor-to-ceiling windows. "David, your law license was suspended this afternoon when the Bar Association learned about your involvement in securities fraud. You won't be practicing law for quite some time, if ever." The blood drained from his face as the reality of his situation finally penetrated his arrogance. Agent Wade positioned the media crew strategically around the apartment's living area, ensuring optimal camera angles for what was about to unfold. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the white marble floors and creating perfect lighting for the cameras that would broadcast this moment to millions of viewers. "Ms. Martinez," Agent Wade said formally, "Dr. Robert Chen, Sophia Chen, David Chen, and Jennifer Park have requested an opportunity to make statements before formal charges are filed. Are you willing to hear what they have to say?" I looked at each of them in turn. These people who'd systematically stolen my work, betrayed my trust, and tried to erase me from my own success story. In my previous life, this moment would have been impossible. I died broken and defeated, never knowing that justice was achievable if you were willing to fight for it with sufficient ruthlessness. "Of course," I said graciously. "I'm always interested in hearing creative fiction." Dr. Chen stepped forward first, his hands trembling slightly as he spoke. "Maya, I want you to know that I never intended for things to go this far. When Sophia first approached me about collaborating on your research, I thought it would be beneficial for everyone involved. Academic collaboration has always—" "Dr. Chen," I interrupted softly, "you've been stealing student research for 15 years. I have documentation of 17 separate cases of intellectual property theft, including the graduate student who killed herself after you destroyed her career. This wasn't collaboration. This was predatory behavior that finally found a victim willing to fight back." His face crumpled as he realized I knew about Rachel Morrison, the PhD candidate who jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge in 2019 after Dr. Chen stole her dissertation research and published it under his own name. Victoria had provided me with every detail of that case, including the suicide note that specifically mentioned Dr. Chen's betrayal. Sophia stepped forward next, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking with desperation. "Maya, please, you have to understand. I was jealous, okay? I've always been jealous of how easily things came to you. Your coding ability, your innovative thinking, even your family relationships. I just wanted to prove that I could be successful too." "So, you decided to steal my success instead of earning your own." "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she sobbed. "It started small, just looking at your notebooks to understand your thought process. But then Dr. Chen said we could turn it into something bigger, something that would benefit everyone. He said you'd never even notice if we used some of your early concepts." "Some of my early concepts?" I stood up, my voice remaining calm despite the rage burning in my chest. "Sophia, you stole my entire life's work. You moved into my childhood bedroom to study my private journals. You turned my own mother against me. You destroyed every relationship I valued while building your success on the foundation of my stolen innovations." Jennifer Park spoke next, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maya, I swear I didn't know it was wrong at first. Sophia told me you'd given permission for her to access your files. She said you were collaborating but wanted to stay in the background. I was just doing what I thought you wanted." "Jennifer," I said quietly, "you downloaded 4 gigabytes of proprietary research files over 6 months. You sold our client list to competitors. You actively sabotaged my professional relationships while positioning yourself for promotion in the company you were helping to destroy. At what point did you think that was a legitimate collaboration? She had no answer, her face flushed with shame as she realized how pathetic her excuse sounded. Finally, David stepped forward, his expression shifting from anger to desperate charm, the same manipulation tactics he'd used throughout our relationship. Maya, baby, you know I love you. Everything I did was because I was trying to help you succeed. Sophia convinced me that you were holding yourself back, that you needed someone to believe in your work enough to bring it to market. I thought I was supporting your career. By sleeping with my best friend while stealing my research? That was a mistake, he said quickly. A terrible mistake that I regret every day. But Maya, what you're doing now, destroying all of us, this isn't who you are. You're kind, forgiving, generous. The woman I fell in love with would never, The woman you fell in love with died 6 months ago, I interrupted, my voice colder than I'd intended. She died when she realized that the people she loved most were systematically destroying her life for their own benefit. What you're looking at now is who I became when I learned that forgiveness is just another word for enabling abuse. The room fell silent, except for the quiet whir of camera equipment and the distant sounds of the city below. Through the windows, I could see news vans gathering in the plaza, 42 floors below, their satellite dishes extending toward the sky like flowers turning toward the sun. Agent Wade checked his watch. Ms. Martinez, the formal charges will be filed within the hour. If you're willing to consider any form of plea arrangement or reduced cooperation— No, I said simply. The word hung in the air like a judge's gavel, final and irrevocable. Sophia collapsed to her knees, her sobs echoing off the apartment's high ceilings. Maya, please. I'll give you everything back, the patents, the money, the company shares. I'll disappear completely. You'll never see me again. Please don't send me to prison. I can't. I won't survive. You should have thought about that before you decided to steal my life. Dr. Chen tried a different approach, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he'd used to intimidate graduate students for decades. Maya, you're making a serious mistake. My connections in the academic and business communities run very deep. If you persist with these charges, you'll find yourself blacklisted from every major technology company in Silicon Valley. Your career will be over before it begins. I laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that seemed to unnerve him more than anger would have. Dr. Chen, in the past 6 hours, I've received collaboration offers from Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Tesla. My patents are being licensed by pharmaceutical companies across 3 continents. The technology you tried to steal has already made me worth more than $50 million, and that's just the beginning. But the charges against us will create a scandal that will make me famous as the victim who fought back and won, I finished. Sometimes the best publicity is being the hero in someone else's downfall. David made one final attempt, dropping the charm and revealing the desperation underneath. Maya, if you do this, if you send us all to prison, you'll destroy innocent people too. Sophia's mother is sick. She needs medical care that insurance won't cover. Dr. Chen has a granddaughter starting college next year. Jennifer's parents immigrated here with nothing. You'll be destroying entire families. The same way you destroyed mine? That's different. No, I said, standing and walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of the city where I'd been reborn into a second chance. It's exactly the same. You made calculated decisions to prioritize your success over my well-being. You turned my own mother against me. You stole not just my work, but my identity, my relationships, my future. Now you face the consequences of those choices. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the apartment as I turned back to face them one final time. The cameras captured every angle as I delivered the words that would end their pleas for mercy. In my previous life, I caught myself, then continued carefully. In the life I lived before I learned to fight back, I would have forgiven you. I would have accepted your apologies, believed your promises to change, and allowed you to continue exploiting my generosity. But that woman is gone. I walked to my desk and retrieved a folder containing photos. Images of Rachel Morrison, the graduate student who'd killed herself because of Dr. Chen's academic theft. Images of other victims whose careers had been destroyed by similar betrayals. Images of the life I might have lived if these people hadn't systematically dismantled my future. You want to know why I won't show mercy? I asked, holding up Rachel's graduation photo. Because mercy is what predators count on from their victims. Mercy is what allows people like you to destroy lives without consequences. Mercy is what killed this brilliant young woman and what would have killed me if I hadn't learned to become something you never expected. I set the photos down and looked directly into the news cameras. I refuse to be merciful to people who showed no mercy to their victims. I refuse to forgive people who would do this again if given the opportunity, and I refuse to enable a system that protects criminals at the expense of the people they've destroyed. Agent Wade stepped forward as my speech concluded. Dr. Robert Chen, Sophia Chen, David Chen, and Jennifer Park, you're formally charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, theft of intellectual property, and a criminal enterprise. You have the right to remain silent. As the Miranda rights were read and the handcuffed prisoners were led toward the elevator, I remained at the window, watching the sun set over the city that had witnessed my death and rebirth. The reflection in the glass showed a woman I finally recognized. Not the naive victim I'd been, but not a monster either. Someone who'd learned that justice sometimes required the courage to be ruthless in service of truth. The elevator doors closed on my former friends and family, carrying them toward a future that would be defined by the consequences of their choices. I felt no joy in their destruction, but I felt no regret either. Sometimes the only way to stop being a victim was to ensure your victimizers faced consequences they couldn't manipulate, charm, or escape. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new relationships built on honest foundations, rather than exploitation and theft. But tonight, for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I was truly free. 2 years later, I stood on the stage of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The crisp mountain air filling my lungs as I looked out at an audience of global leaders, tech innovators, and media representatives from 43 countries. The lights were warm against my face, but not as warm as the satisfaction that filled my chest as I accepted the Technology Innovation Award. The same award Dr. Chen had coveted his entire career and never achieved. Ladies and gentlemen, the presenter announced, this year's recipient revolutionized predictive healthcare technology while simultaneously exposing one of the largest corporate fraud schemes in Silicon Valley history. Please welcome Maya Martinez, CEO of Meridian AI Solutions. The applause was thunderous, sustained, and entirely earned. Behind me, a massive screen displayed the logo of my company, no longer the stolen startup that Sophia had tried to claim, but a global enterprise with offices in San Francisco, London, Tokyo, and Singapore. The neural network technology they'd attempted to steal had become the foundation of medical breakthroughs that were saving thousands of lives annually. I adjusted the microphone, my hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. The custom Valentino gown I wore, deep blue silk that complemented the diamond earrings that had been my gift to myself after the first 100 million in revenue, felt like armor and wings simultaneously. Thank you, I began, my voice carrying clearly across the vast auditorium. 2 years ago, I learned that the most dangerous enemies aren't strangers who attack you openly, but trusted friends who smile while they destroy you. Today, I want to talk about what happens when you refuse to let that destruction define you. In the audience, I spotted familiar faces. Harrison Wright, the investor who'd backed my company after witnessing Sophia's arrest. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation. The Stanford professor who'd become my new mentor and research partner. And Victoria Chen, my business partner and the closest thing to family I'd found since rebuilding my life from scratch. The technology that brings us together today, AI systems that can predict cardiac events 6 months before symptoms appear, algorithms that identify cancer markers invisible to traditional screening, exists because someone tried to steal it and failed. Betrayal, it turns out, can be the greatest motivator for excellence. The audience laughed, a sound that mixed appreciation with nervous awareness of the corporate warfare I'd survived. The story of my systematic destruction, of Dr. Chen's fraud network had become legendary in Silicon Valley, taught in business schools as both a cautionary tale about intellectual property theft and a masterclass in strategic revenge. But I'm not here to talk about revenge, I continued, my voice softening. I'm here to talk about redemption, not the redemption of those who betrayed me. Some mistakes are too calculated for forgiveness, but the redemption of believing that innovation can emerge from devastation, that trust can be rebuilt on more solid foundations. I clicked my remote, and the screen behind me displayed images of the Meridian Foundation, the nonprofit organization I'd established with 10% of my company's profits. The foundation provided legal protection and financial support for inventors whose work had been stolen, ensuring that what happened to me and to Rachel Morrison would happen to fewer people in the future. We've helped 47 inventors reclaim stolen intellectual property in the past 18 months, I announced, the numbers representing real lives saved from the destruction I'd experienced. We've provided legal representation that resulted in over $200 million in recovered damages. And we've established a network of resources that ensures brilliant minds can't be silenced by institutional theft. The applause that followed felt different, warmer, more personal. These weren't just business leaders appreciating a successful company. They were people recognizing the transformation of personal trauma into systemic change. The greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies, I said, looking directly into the news cameras that would broadcast this moment globally. The greatest revenge is building something so successful, so meaningful, that their betrayal becomes the footnote to your triumph rather than the headline of your tragedy. As I concluded my speech and stepped down from the stage, the standing ovation followed me into the wings. But the moment that mattered most came when Victoria Chen embraced me, her eyes bright with pride and affection. "Your father would be proud," she whispered, referring to the man whose research had inspired my neural network breakthrough. The same research Dr. Chen had tried to steal decades earlier. "You've honored his legacy and created your own." The private reception that followed was held in a glass-walled pavilion overlooking the Swiss Alps, the mountains etched against the evening sky like a promise of permanence. I moved through the crowd of global leaders and tech innovators, accepting congratulations and fielding collaboration offers that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. My phone buzzed with a message from Agent Wade. "Saw the speech. Outstanding. Thought you'd want to know. Dr. Chen's parole hearing was denied again. He'll serve his full sentence." I deleted the message without responding. Dr. Chen's fate was no longer my concern. He'd become irrelevant to my story, reduced to a cautionary tale about the consequences of systematic theft. His 15-year prison sentence was simply the price he'd paid for underestimating his victims. "Maya?" A familiar voice called my name, and I turned to see Marcus Rivera, the Phoenix Pharmaceuticals executive who'd been instrumental in exposing the original fraud. He looked distinguished in his evening wear, his smile genuine as he approached with a champagne flute in each hand. "Marcus, I'm so glad you could make it," I said, accepting the champagne. "How are the clinical trials proceeding?" "Beyond our most optimistic projections," he replied. "Your cardiac prediction algorithms have achieved 97% accuracy across all demographics. We're looking at FDA approval within 6 months, which means your technology will be available in hospitals worldwide by next year." 97% accuracy. The same algorithms Sophia had tried to steal were now saving lives on a scale I'd never imagined possible. The irony was beautiful. Her betrayal had motivated me to perfect the technology beyond what I might have achieved without the pressure of proving my worth. "And the licensing agreements in Asia?" "Signed yesterday. Meridian AI will be the standard for predictive healthcare technology across 12 countries. Your net worth just exceeded $200 million. $200 million. The number was almost abstract, but the reality was concrete. Enough money to never worry about financial security again. Enough influence to protect other inventors from the predators who'd tried to destroy me. Enough power to ensure my story ended in triumph rather than tragedy. The evening continued with conversations about collaboration, innovation, and the future of medical technology. But the most meaningful moment came when I stepped onto the reception pavilion's balcony, needing a moment of quiet contemplation as the magnitude of my transformation settled over me. The Swiss Alps stretched endlessly toward the horizon, their peaks catching the last light of the setting sun. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of snow and pine trees. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I felt truly at peace. My phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Saw your speech on the news. Congratulations on your success. I hope you're happy. S. Sophia. Even from federal prison, she was still trying to insert herself into my narrative. I deleted the message without reading it twice and blocked the number. Her opinion of my happiness was irrelevant. She'd forfeited the right to care about my well-being when she'd chosen to destroy it. Another message arrived, this one from my mother. Maya, I've been watching your success from afar. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know how proud I am of what you've become. You're stronger than I ever realized. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the complex emotions that came with unresolved family relationships. My mother had made her choice when she'd given Sophia access to my private journals in my childhood bedroom. The consequences of that choice, losing her daughter's trust and respect, were hers to bear. But unlike Sophia's message, I didn't delete this one. Instead, I replied, I'm glad you're proud. That means more than you know. But I've learned that love without loyalty is just sentiment. I hope you've learned that too. The response was immediate. I have, every day. I put my phone away and remained on the balcony watching the stars emerge as darkness settled over the mountains. The woman who died in a car crash 2 years ago, broken, betrayed, and defeated, felt like a distant memory. The woman who'd been reborn into a second chance at justice had evolved into someone stronger, wiser, and more purposeful than I'd ever imagined possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new innovations, and new opportunities to transform the healthcare industry through technology. But tonight, I was content to stand in the silence of the mountains, grateful for the journey that had led me from victimhood to victory. My phone buzzed one final time, a message from Victoria. Dinner tomorrow? I have a proposal for expanding the Foundation's international operations. I smiled, typing back, absolutely, I love building things that matter. As I prepared to return to the reception, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. The woman looking back at me bore no resemblance to the naive, trusting person who'd been systematically destroyed by people she'd loved. This woman had learned that strength came from surviving betrayal, that wisdom came from recognizing patterns of exploitation, and that true success came from building something meaningful from the ashes of what others had tried to destroy. The greatest revenge I discovered wasn't just surviving. It was thriving so completely that your betrayers became footnotes in the story of your triumph. And as I returned to the celebration of my success, surrounded by genuine allies and meaningful achievements, I knew that the best chapters of my story were still being written. The war was over. I had won. And the victory was sweeter than I'd ever imagined possible.